This is Where We Land, a podcast bringing together stories of immigration and multicultural identity. I'm Luciana.
And I'm Claudia.
We're originally from Peru, so we have a pretty good idea of what living between two cultures is like. But we believe that no matter where you come from, immigrating to the U.S. is an experience rich with duality and meaning. Join us as we speak with immigrants from all over the world about their journey and how it shaped who they are today.
Today, we're speaking with Alex Klotz. His journey has taken him from Paris to Shanghai and now to Brooklyn. While living in Shanghai, he started dating a fellow expat, an American. And today they have 2 young children. He's a serial entrepreneur, and his latest venture is called Brooklyn Frenchie, a shop that offers merchandise with a taste of French culture.
We talk with Alex about what it's like to raise kids in a culture that is not your own, how to juggle 2 languages in one household, and what factors he considers when picking the next city to move to.
Let's dive into our conversation with Alex.
So we like to start the podcast with each asking every guest, like, where in the world does your journey start?
Well, I guess it started for me in Paris. I'm from Paris, France, grew up there, studied there, graduated there. And around 2006, I decided to leave to go work in Asia, and more specifically in China, in Shanghai.
Why Asia? Why did you decide to go there?
I think I've had that goal, personal and professional, for a very long time. As far as I can remember, I've been drawn to go and live there, even as a kid, really.
That's interesting that you say even as a kid. What was it culturally about Asia that you liked?
Yeah, different things. I think, in France, a lot of kids grew up with, being exposed to like the Japanese culture, Chinese culture, whether it was on TV, whether it was music, whether it was, games, toys, video games, things.
Yeah.
Animes, absolutely. So I was very much into these things when I was younger, which kind of like made me focus on the continent as a whole, and later on Japan and China more specifically.
I understand. I'm a big anime fan myself. Yeah.
Oh, great.
Yeah. I'm curious, to go. I actually personally haven't been to Asia, but looks, amazing.
Yeah. I think Americans have several stereotypes about France and the French. I know Emily in Paris is a show that caused much sensation, both positive and negative. So I'm just wondering, for you specifically, what are some of those differences between France, the US, that for you stuck out?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great question. I think a funny one is at the time at which we have dinner, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, how so?
Well, it tends to be much earlier in the US. I feel it's anywhere between 5:30 to 6:30, maybe, typically, I would say. Versus in France, I think very few people, if any, eat before 8 p.m. So that's a big one. That's a daily one that I notice. I think it's just relationships, I think, are a little bit different. When you meet people, I don't know if it's related to the fact that I live in New York or if it's actually true elsewhere in the US. But I think how easily or not you meet people and how easily or not you form relationships with people might be a little bit different as well, in the way that I think it takes maybe a little bit more time here than it does in France.
Yeah, I really understand that. Luciana and I are both from Peru, and in Peru, there's just such an informality, such a lack of boundaries that people have that is very jarring, but also makes for fast relationships, fast friends, because people just feel very comfortable just showing up at your house, just coming over, just, self-inviting themselves into your world is very common there.
Yeah, I think it's the Latin aspect, I think, of Peru and France that we have in common.
Yeah. And on the relationship subject, you're married to an American, correct?
Absolutely. I met my wife when I was living in China. So we met through friends, through common friends. So that's how we met. And she's from Richmond, Virginia, originally.
Mm-hmm. So you're in China, you meet your wife who's American, you're really another culture.
It's a lot.
What was dating someone from, somewhere like America like?
It's always interesting because you're always discovering the other person's, culture through them, and their habits and their way of life is slightly different from yours. So you're learning that way. But I mean, of course, it was, yeah, of course, it was fun. Yeah.
I wonder if you two meeting in China was almost like neutralizing, because it wasn't you dating an American woman in France. It wasn't you dating an American woman in America. So it was almost no one's home territory. We both are
Neutral
adapting
grounds.
to this. Yeah.
Right.
Maybe that was helpful.
No, I think that's a very good point. I think in that case also it was quite interesting because we were both very far from home. I think people who do that, expats or otherwise, tend to kind of like stick together a little bit. And I think that kind of like made up for like maybe the cultural differences that we might have had. And again, I don't think they were that big. There were some, but I think that kind of like leveled a little bit that field in that way.
Mm-hmm. Was the English was the language that you guys spoke?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Okay.
Today my wife speaks French, but because I think we met through American friends, I think we started with English. We kind of like stick to it.
Okay. How old was your firstborn when you left China?
She was 2.
2. Okay. Okay.
Baby.
Yeah, she's 7.5 today. Yeah.
7.5. So probably not much, if any, recollection of her time in China at all, right?
Not so much. I mean, she says she does, but you know, she was 2, so it can be that clear and precise, I think, in her mind. But maybe talking about food, maybe foods, maybe smells, things like that you tend to remember when you're younger, rather than like actual, situations and things like that of that nature.
And what language do you guys speak at home? Is it English?
We speak English, but I use French with the kids.
I mean, I can definitely relate with that. I'm obviously Peruvian. My husband is American. We have 2 kids, a 3-year-old and an almost 9-month-old. So I'm in the thick of it. And we speak English now, but I would say my husband, he speaks Spanish, and he made a big effort to speak exclusively in Spanish to our son the first 2 years of his life. And so I was like, he must learn this because, I mean, obviously my husband's American. We live here. My kids are going to be American. They're going to absorb that. It's going to be who they are. But I need them to have this Peruvian identity. It's so big for me. And my husband agrees. And he's like, we should speak Spanish. For me, language and probably then food are the 2 biggest things in my Peruvian culture identity that I want my kids to have, to know, to feel like they are part of. I wanted to know if that's the same for you.
I mean, I think it's a good start. If they have like food and language, I think that's 2 pretty big chunks of it. I think, I don't know if it was like super conscious. I think it was fairly natural, when I started like, using French with my daughter, and then later on with my son. And I think today it's great because my son is 3.5, so he's a little bit too young to draw any conclusions, although he can definitely like say a few things, and he's definitely getting there. But she's definitely fluent now. Like she's like her French is definitely flawless, and of course, same for English, right? Like we live in New York, like she uses that also all the time. But she goes to a bilingual school. Like there's a great school by our place. They have like this dual language program that definitely helps with that, because I think outside of school, I'm probably, except her friends, but like I'm probably the only person using French with her. So there's that need for someone else, other than me to do that. And as far as my kid, I mean, like my son, yeah, he's 3.5. I think for his age, he's definitely on the same tracks. I can tell like it's picking up like that. We can interact here and there in French, so that's great. Yeah, and food. I mean, I guess they eat it like every day or so. So there's that too. But they're very important components. I agree.
So I think we skipped over a little bit. Last time we spoke about your timeline, we were in Asia. And I'm so curious because these things, there's a million factors into where you decide to live. You're in New York right now, what were those conversations like? Did you ever think France would be an option? Or were you very welcoming of going to America? Was that a place you wanted to go to before and now thought, okay, this is a great opportunity?
So the main reason why we decided to leave was because, 13 years and 10 years, they're a long time. And I mean, I know that neither I or my wife nor my wife wanted to or planned to stay that long. I mean, obviously we enjoyed our time there, but at some point we were like, okay, we have a kid. Do we want that kid to grow up there, or do we want to go closer to our family? So that's kind of like what opened the door, right? I mean, like me, I'm also super organized, maybe sometimes a little bit too much. So I had prepared like almost like a PowerPoint, where I was like, okay, this is where we could go. When we started like narrowing down, we kind of like had New York in sight because I think it checked a lot of boxes. We didn't want to end up like in a small town when, where I would be like the only, person, not even from the country, maybe, who knows?
Right.
Right. You needed a big city with an international population.
Exactly. And then we wanted also certain things for our daughter, also in terms of culture and things like that. So that's kind of like how we came to New York, I mean, it was definitely like, closer to my wife's family, which was good. We had to make a choice there. Yeah, but I didn't have to be convinced. No, I had been here before. Christine was happy to come back. We were really excited.
Yeah. I mean, New York is such a amazing city. I mean, speaking about like the food, I'm sure you can get amazing Asian food there.
Absolutely.
I'm curious about raising children who are in a culture that isn't your own. I have this friend, she married a Polish man, moved to Poland, and then I went to visit her when her children were really, really young. They were like 3 and 5. And I walk into her house. She was one of my closest friends in Peru. We spoke Spanish all the time. And then I arrive and she is speaking Polish to these kids. 2 little Polish kids are running around her house speaking in Polish, fighting in Polish. And I'm like, you are raising foreigners. There are foreigners in your house and you call them your children. I was like, well, what did I think? That her kids were going to speak English and Spanish like us? No, of course they're speaking Polish. So I'm wondering what has surprised you about raising your children in America?
Yeah, so some things have surprised me. And I think that's kind of like similar to what you're saying, which is how easily and quickly they adapt.
Right.
Now, the thing is, it's obviously different for my daughter and my son because he was born here. So he doesn't know much, other things than that. But my daughter, though, the move, let alone like the geographical distance between China and the US, even though she was 2 when we left, I'm pretty sure like she had like some feelings about the place, like what the language you hear when you like step outside the house is not the same, obviously. And I think like the ability to adapt and change and make friends, that really surprised me because it happened really quickly. So, and at the age when we left Asia, she was so young that maybe it was normal that she was not where she was, let's say, a year later when we were here in New York. But I think that was still a big wow, for us, like that she adapted.
I'm curious, as they get older, how you're going to experience like more American stuff, like traditional American stuff. So, in Peru, no one does Halloween. Halloween's not really a thing. But here, it's like you go to the pumpkin patch, you get pumpkins, you have all these things. And so my sister was visiting. I was like, I need an activity to do with the kids. My son was like, pumpkins. All right, let's go to the pumpkin patch. Let's do the hayride. And so I'm taking my sister, her husband, who speaks no English. And my sister's like, so we're going to a farm? And I'm like, yes, this is fun. This is fun. The kids like this. And she's just like, what, voluntarily? I'm like, yes, we're paying to go. And she's like, why? Like, just not even, but I'm like, this is a thing that you do here. And then you carve the pumpkin and then you put the candle in. And she's just like, this seems like we're just doing a lot of manual labor for fun. And I'm just like, we had that experience ourselves. When we moved to the US, my mom made us like, hey, join Girl Scouts, try baseball, which is so foreign to us, to Peru. We would never do that in Peru. But like we were allowed to do and try all of the American things. And it was kind of fun to then say, yes, I like this, or no, I don't like this, but we could choose. And I want to do the same thing for my kids. I'm assuming, that's kind of what I'm hearing from you. Like,
Yeah, exactly, right? But I think, yeah, of course. I mean, like, you need to embrace, like, the culture where you're at. I mean, of course, they're like, oh, what's this? Or what's that? I heard about this. Or my American friend, like, told me about this. I want to try. Like, very often, that's what happens for us. So, yeah, of course. I mean, now, like, the activities that they do, I don't know if they're so American because my son plays soccer. And my daughter, she does ballet. So, I mean, ballet is kind of universal, but I don't know if you can attach it so strongly to the American culture. I let them do what they want. I don't want to push them too much towards one direction or the other. I think it's, more natural and nice for them just to make their own choices when it comes to that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay.
I'm curious about that French community and its relationship to language, because, for instance, in the Latin American community in the States, language is a big thing. Almost like if you don't speak Spanish, that can exclude you from some like Latin American groups within the United States, because language is just such a big part of our culture, and being able to speak fluently with everyone. It's just, when we get together, it's automatically what we do. And I'm wondering if with France, if that's the same thing. Does it matter where you're from as long as you're speaking French? Or is it more like, no, this is just France?
No, I think because, I think Spanish and French have that in common, is that there are so many countries that speak the language that it doesn't matter if you're from France or not. You can be from Belgium, you can be from Quebec, you can be from, some country in Africa or like South America. There's some too that speak French. It doesn't matter as long as you do. If you're like with French speakers, everybody speaks French. And if you're not, it's kind of like, yeah, too bad. It's sounds a bit harsh like that, but I mean, like it's exactly what you said. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the same for us.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. What do you miss most about France?
Yeah, I think it's just it's difficult. I mean, like, for example, when you leave to go to work every morning pretty early, let's assume around like, between 6 and 7, for example, you would definitely pass like a couple bakeries in France or in Paris. And that smell, like, you can't find that anywhere else. Like, it's important. I feel like I've never seen it before. So anywhere else. So that's one thing. Sometimes it's just a little bit more, it's a little bit more slow, but in a good way. I feel like people take the time to enjoy whatever it is that they're doing. Sometimes too much, maybe we can say that. but they do that, right? Versus here, it's kind of like odd if you do. Like, it's like, what is he doing? Like, why is he just standing there by himself, like having like, I don't know, a glass of wine? Like, that's weird. It's like, no, it's not. But so these things, it's kind of like intangible things like that.
Yeah, it's so, especially in New York. I think that's so fast paced. I think American culture for sure, but it's just so jarring in New York.
Oh, totally.
Something that really struck me in working there was lunch that people would eat at their desk.
Unheard of in Peru.
To me, that just seems so bonkers. I'm like, and I worked for a French company before for 6 years here. Their big headquarters were in Paris, so I would go there for work. And they had a lot of, like, we would have lunch. There was no one eating in their desk. We would get up, we would go. Some would have a glass of wine with their lunch, which I was like, hey, I am not frowning at this. But also, like, it was like a moment to exchange, to relax, to really disconnect. Everyone's still working hard. We're just going to take this time to just, have a little bit of human interaction. It was so lovely. It reminded me a lot of Peru. And I really miss that. That is a big difference. And I think that you say the Latin part, like really between Peru and France, I think that I can relate to the stuff that you're describing for sure.
Yeah.
So you're launching a shop. We took a look at your online website. Were all of these things that we're talking about, is this where you got these ideas?
Yeah, sure. So, like, first, because I love that. I've done that a few times already in my life. I've launched several businesses. This one happens to be the last one, Brooklyn Frenchie. It's that, yeah, I think it's related to all the things that we just discussed. I think it's kind of like to build a bridge between the cultures. I've joked about having, like so many French words in the English language. I've read somewhere it's anywhere between like 30 and 40% are from French. There's a fair amount of German, rooted and Latin as well. But when you think about like these words like déjà vu or others like this, people might know or not that they're coming from there. So I thought, why don't I put some, on clothes?
Yeah, whenever I think of words in English that come from France, from the French language, I always think of food.
What about filet mignon?
Filet mignon. Just delicious deliciousness. Yeah, pamplemousse.
Right, pamplemousse. Yeah, exactly.
Uh-huh. Okay, last question. For this exact moment right now, do you feel more French? Do you feel more American?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think I still feel French because, in the grand scheme of things, like I haven't been here for that long yet. So I guess now through the kids a little bit, of course, because, they each have like an American passport, and therefore, the link that I have with them makes me feel a certain way about the US for sure. But as for me, totally objectively speaking, I think it's going to take a few more years, but I'll definitely get there, right?
So, our final segment is called Speak My Language. And this is a segment where our guest teaches us a word or phrase from their language that doesn't have an exact equivalent in English. So, does something come to mind?
Yeah, there's two. There are two words. First one, it's called terroir. It's spelled Terroir. Terroir. It's a word that we use to explain like kind of like the mix of climate and soil and know-how that people used originally for wine. So when you say, oh, it's from that kind of terroir, that means it's like the knowledge that they have in that region with the climate they have. It's very, very specific. So I don't think that, yeah, that doesn't exist in English, I believe.
That's a good one. That's a good one.
Absolutely. The other one is flâner. We spell it Flaner, flâner.
Mm-hmm.
And flâner, it means like wandering kind of like endlessly. Like people do that all the time. Like you just take a stroll with no real purpose. Just to like get some air, things like that. And you just go like in the city, just like past some stores. You don't necessarily want to buy something. You might even end up buying something or sit down, like have a glass of wine or just like for no real reason. And you might just realize that you've been, going around for maybe like an hour or two or three, but just enjoying yourself, not really, no pressure, just like, yeah, wandering around in the city, in the streets of in my case, in Paris, but could happen elsewhere, right?
Nice. Flâner. Yeah.
I love the feeling of both of these words.
Yeah, I think they're very telling. Like to me, even like sends me back to what you were saying earlier about what I miss. I think these two things are some things that I miss. Very typical of France.
Well, thank you so much, Alex. This has been wonderful.
Thank you so much.
So, where did this one land with you?
So many interesting topics came up here. I loved how we spoke about balancing letting kids choose their activities and friends versus ensuring they grow up with like a certain identity, like French identity. Like Alex was like so keen on his kids choosing. And I've been thinking a lot about that lately. I do think for my daughter, I want her to learn marinera, which is a Peruvian dance that we all learned, that I learned when I was little. It's fun. I know they teach it close by or like, 30 minutes away, whatever. And I'm like, I know that ballet will be a thing. We also did ballet. Claudia hated it, but we did it.
It was so bad.
And I'm like, sure, she can also do the ballet, but for sure she will do marinera. And I feel very passionate about that one. And like with my son too, like the riding horses is something that was really big in Peru. We definitely want, when we go to Peru, I want him to do that, but I'm not going to just like push the horseback riding here if it's not something that he's super into.
Here, I don't know how you feel about it, but it's not just riding horses to ride horses.
No.
It would have to be a Peruvian paso horse.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
It's a particular type of horse, so specific. Yeah. He can do it when we're there, but it's just, it's weird how you want to let them do their own thing, but I also want to teach, like, this is what we do in Peru. This is part of who you are. But it's also, it's good for them to know, but it's also not theirs to carry. I don't want them to carry like this, but my mom is this, and oh my gosh, she's so Peruvian, and it's just like a rejection, kind of.
Right.
I want him to know about it, feel proud, and both of them to want to embrace it later on. So I just feel like I have to sprinkle. You have to be very tactical.
Yeah. And I think you're not very heavy-handed. I think it's nice. I think it's nice that you expose them to what kids do in Peru and then see what sticks with each one. And at the very least, at a family gathering, they'll whip up a handkerchief and be able to dance with us.
Yeah, exactly.
Can't wait. Can't wait for that day.
Yeah, it'll be fun.
The other thing that I found interesting about our conversation with Alex was that his wife is American, but he told us that she speaks French.
Yeah.
And that they were making this effort to raise their kids also being fluent in French. And you, of course, are also married to an American who spoke Spanish. And like you told Alex, you guys made a real effort for your husband to only speak Spanish until your son was 2, right? The first 2 years of his life.
Yeah.
So that got me thinking of like, have you ever dated someone who didn't speak any Spanish? Or what has that experience been like?
No, I mean, like boyfriends that I had in the past were Spanish descent, or, for me, the language is important. I don't think I ever thought I would be with someone who wouldn't speak Spanish. But when I met my husband, it wasn't like, oh, do you speak Spanish? Like it was crazy. It was just like such an afterthought. And when he shared that he did, right away, I knew it fairly quickly. I was like, oh, that's nice. Like that's a nice thing. And not really like, it's not a language that we've used a bunch before we had kids. But it's so nice to have now that we do have kids, because I think that's where it would have made a big impact. Like, I don't think my son's Spanish would be as good as it is. It is nice also to share that part of yourself that, like, it's just effortless, kind of.
I understand, because for me, I've always thought, like, oh no, my partner has to speak Spanish. Like, and not just like understand it. Like, I don't want to, no knocks to your husband, but he's not like perfectly fluent.
No,
he's
not perfect.
I remember in my 20s or thinking like, no. My partner needs to be able to follow me in my constant switching back and forth between English and Spanish, or else I felt for some reason like if they weren't able to do that, they weren't going to be able to get like the full picture of who I am. Like I felt like each language brings out like different sides of you. And I've been told this in the past that like by more than one person, you're so much sweeter in Spanish. In English, you're much harsher. And I'm like, all right, okay.
Right. I guess that's how I roll. Right.
Noted that's how I am, I guess. But yeah, I do feel like each language brings out different sides of you. And I felt like, how is my partner going to fully know me if they can't know me in Spanish,
Yeah, I understand that, because that's definitely the same for English, I would say. Like, I would have never considered seriously dating someone who didn't speak English.
Yeah. I do have to say that my opinion has changed, however. Like, I was very adamant. I felt very strongly about this in my 20s. I was like, he has to.
As one does in their 20s.
But then I started to think, no, I think it's rather okay. Like, if they only get to know me through English. I got an acceptance with it, and this is going to sound really weird, but I actually think that acceptance started to happen when Dad died. So I remember thinking, oh my God, my husband will never meet my dad.
Right.
Because I haven't met my husband yet. So, and that was such an awful thought.
I had the same thought, yeah.
Yeah, because Dad is such a huge part of who I am. And how I operate and how and my sense of humor and why I do the things I do. And I thought, how could my future husband ever understand who I am and why I am the way I am if he never meets my dad?
Right.
And Dad was such a larger than life character and so complicated and nuanced like most human beings. And I'm like, I can't possibly explain this man to my future husband. I will never do it justice. He will never understand. He'll never know this large part of me. So he'll never know me fully. And then as time went by, that was like the initial grief after Dad passed.
Right, yes.
And then as time went by, I was like, you know what? I think I'm pretty comfortable now with like, no, my partner is going to get to know my dad through me mainly, and also through my family, and through the bits and pieces and things that I loved about him and that I want to share. And you know what? That's going to be great. I almost feel like that's going to be really sweet, actually, to get to do. And so once I came to terms with that, I did this parallel where I was like, oh, he doesn't speak Spanish. I'm like, oh yeah, that's fine. He'll get to know me in English. Like,
right.
Like, well, we're good. Like, he doesn't need to be privy to my Spanish-speaking version to fully know me. I think he can fully know me in English. Like, we'll be fine.
Do you think a part of you is also, I know you've always been comfortable with English, so obviously this feels like, do you think you're more comfortable in English now? I know you've always been comfortable.
Yes. That's
It's weird, but I feel more comfortable in English, which is so weird for me to say because I've always felt comfortable in English, but I am more on the bigger spectrum of feeling comfortable now.
There's something about structure that feels so much more comfortable in English, but Spanish just also like sometimes I need more words in English than I have.
I get that. I get 100% that because
like in Spanish, I have more words.
I feel that pretty regularly. Or I'm just like trying to find the word and I'm like, but it's crazy because you know what? Now it's starting to happen in Spanish. It's starting to happen.
Oh, I hate that. That's so sad. I shed a tear. I shed a tear for the loss of vocabulary.
I'm like, why can't I? And I find myself saying, what is the word? What is the word?
Oh, sadness. That's it from us. Subscribe so you don't miss the next episode and check us out on Instagram at Where We Land Pod. Hasta la vista, babies.
Ciao, ciao. At Where We Land, we know some immigrant experiences are harder than others, especially for those in the margins of our current legal system. If you would like to help, we encourage you to support organizations that provide services for immigrants and champion their rights. You can find a list of organizations in the show notes. Thank you all for listening. Until next time.